At 4:22 a.m. on a moonless morning over the Arabian Sea, a decision worth $13 billion finally reached its point of no return. A freighter sailing under a Russian flag, the Kapitan Vulov, moved quietly through international waters toward the southeast. Hidden inside its cargo holds was nearly $1 billion worth of Iranian military equipment, ballistic missile components, electronic warfare systems, and advanced drones. Enough technology to shift the balance of power across the Persian Gulf. What the crew didn't realize was that this shipment had been tracked from the very moment the first crate left a production facility outside Moscow. The freighter believed that darkness and open ocean meant safety. Instead, it was sailing straight into the operational reach of one of the most powerful naval groups in the world. The USS Abraham Lincoln is more than a warship. It represents a floating center of naval capability, 100,000 tons powered by nuclear reactors, carrying around 75 aircraft and more than 4,000 sailors trained for missions exactly like this one. For 6 days, the carrier had quietly followed the freighter's path, remaining distant, unseen, while building a complete tactical picture. The crew aboard the Kapitan Vulov assumed they were crossing an empty ocean. In reality, the Arabian Sea is one of the most heavily monitored waterways on the planet. When the ship departed Vladivostok, numerous surveillance systems recorded its departure before it even cleared Russian territorial waters. By the time it passed through the Strait of Malacca, analysts already knew extensive details about the vessel, its captain, and its crew. The Russians believed strict radio silence would keep their mission hidden. In practice, it revealed more than they expected. Silence itself can be a signal, especially to intelligence systems designed to notice patterns. At 4:18, the directive arrived from Fleet Command: execute Operation Scuttle. High above the ocean, a P-8 Poseidon patrol aircraft had been circling at 30,000 feet since midnight. From that altitude, the aircraft's sensor systems quietly examined the sea below. Its AN/APY-10 radar scanned the surface with remarkable detail, capable of distinguishing different types of shipping containers. Mounted beneath the nose was the MX-20 electro-optical and infrared sensor turret. Instead of looking through metal, thermal imaging detects heat patterns spreading across a structure. Slight differences in temperature caused by ventilation, insulation gaps, and stored equipment create signatures visible to advanced sensors. Missile fuel containers generate distinctive thermal profiles. Even electronics that are powered down leave subtle heat patterns. On the operator's displays inside the P-8, the cargo layout formed a thermal map that closely matched known Iranian equipment manifests, right down to the placement of individual containers. Visual confirmation was achieved. The target was verified. At exactly 4:22, the next phase began. An EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft moved into position. Unlike traditional combat aircraft, its role was not explosive or dramatic. Its work happened quietly and invisibly. 5 ALQ-99 tactical jamming pods hung beneath its wings. Twin F414 engines carried the jet to a holding point roughly 12 miles from the freighter, close enough to influence the target's systems but far enough to remain unseen. The Growler's receivers immediately began mapping every electromagnetic signal coming from the ship. Radio transmissions, satellite links, navigation signals, anything emitting energy was detected and cataloged within seconds. Then the jamming began. First, the freighter's satellite communication links stopped responding. Moments later, commercial radio frequencies dissolved into static. GPS signals became unreliable and inconsistent. Within a minute and a half, the Kapitan Vulov effectively lost its electronic connection to the outside world. From the bridge, it looked like a strange chain reaction of equipment failures. Satellite phone offline, radio producing only noise, navigation systems showing impossible positions. To the captain, it appeared as if several systems had simply broken at once. What he couldn't see was the aircraft in the darkness carefully disrupting every channel his ship relied on. While the crew struggled with their instruments, something else was already moving toward them. At 4:26, 2 MH-60 Seahawk helicopters lifted from the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln. Each carried 8 operators from SEAL Team 5, 16 personnel in total. Their gear included M4 carbines, breaching equipment, and demolition charges designed to disable the freighter if necessary. The objective was clear: secure the vessel, take control of the bridge, place charges, and leave before detonation. For 3 days, the team had studied the freighter's layout. The crew consisted of 43 sailors, mostly Filipino deckhands, and several Russian officers, none trained for combat. There were also 8 security personnel linked to Iranian forces, carrying AK-style rifles. They could be dangerous if alerted, but surprise would remove most of that risk. The helicopters flew low over the ocean, barely 50 feet above the waves. Their navigation lights were off, and the pilots relied on night vision equipment to guide them through the darkness. Approaching from the stern provided natural acoustic cover from the ship's engines. At 4:34, the helicopters settled into a hover, roughly 70 feet above the freighter's rear deck. Thick ropes dropped toward the metal surface below. One by one, the operators descended, sliding down the ropes in practiced rhythm, about 40 seconds for each person, landing silently on the deck of a ship whose crew still had no idea what was unfolding around them. 40 pounds of equipment added weight to every step. Boots hit the deck, clear the rope, form up, move. The first team moved quickly toward the superstructure. Taking control of the bridge was the top priority. About 90 seconds into the operation, they encountered the first crew member, a Filipino deckhand who had stepped outside for a cigarette. Within seconds, he was restrained and seated against the bulkhead, still trying to understand what had just happened. The second team headed toward the cargo holds, carrying the demolition package. These weren't random explosives. Each charge had a specific role. Some were designed to breach sections of the hull below the waterline. Others were intended to destroy the cargo containers themselves from the inside. The goal was simple: structural damage that would eventually send the vessel to the bottom in deep water, where recovery would be nearly impossible. 4:38. The bridge was secured. The Russian captain looked up to see 4 operators entering the bridge with weapons pointed directly at him. His first officer instinctively reached toward the alarm panel, but a hand gently stopped him before he could press it. At that moment, it was already clear the situation was under control. Within 30 seconds, the entire bridge crew had been restrained. Below deck, the demolition team worked through the cargo area with practiced efficiency. Every container carrying military equipment had already been identified using the thermal imaging data collected earlier by the surveillance aircraft. Magnetic clamps secured the shape charges in place while synchronized timers were set. Next came the hull charges. They were positioned at specific structural points calculated to allow maximum flooding once the sequence began. The Kapitan Vulov stretched nearly 800 feet and was built with multiple watertight compartments. Ship designers create these systems specifically to prevent rapid sinking. But demolition experts had spent days studying the plans and identifying the exact spots where those protections could be bypassed. The onboard security team never had time to organize a response. They were asleep together in a single berthing space. When the door opened, they woke up to find themselves surrounded. Faced with overwhelming control of the situation, the moment ended quickly without resistance. 4:44. Charges set, extraction began. The teams moved back toward the pickup point with the same speed they used during insertion. Meanwhile, the ship's crew had been gathered in the forward mess hall and secured. The MH-60 helicopters returned overhead. The pickup was quick, operators climbed aboard, and within moments the aircraft lifted away. From the first rope hitting the deck to the final liftoff, the entire operation lasted just 14 minutes. But the carrier strike group's plan extended far beyond the ship itself. While the boarding team was working, additional elements had already moved into position. The mission was not only to stop one delivery, it was about shutting down the entire supply route. 449, 4 FA-18E Super Hornets launched from the USS Abraham Lincoln. Each aircraft carried 4 GBU 32J DAM precision-guided bombs, each weighing about 2,000 pounds. Across the flight, that meant 16 bombs and more than 30,000 pounds of explosive power. Their target was the loading facility at Chabahar Port on the Iranian coast, the destination where the shipment had been scheduled to arrive. JDAM guidance is relatively straightforward but extremely effective. The weapon starts as a standard Mark 84 bomb. A guidance kit is attached to the body, adding GPS-assisted navigation and an inertial guidance system. Before release, the aircraft programs the target coordinates. During flight, GPS continuously updates the bomb's position. If GPS signals become unreliable, the inertial navigation system takes over using internal sensors. In GPS mode, accuracy can be within roughly 5 meters. Even without GPS, the system can still reach within about 30 meters. The guidance kit costs around $25,000, attached to a bomb body worth only a few thousand more. Precision strike capability at a surprisingly low cost compared to many advanced weapons. The Super Hornets cruised at 25,000 feet, remaining outside Iranian airspace. From international waters, they released their JDAMs. 2 struck the main loading dock structure. 4 more destroyed the large gantry cranes used for cargo handling. 6 penetrated warehouse roofs before detonating inside. Secondary blasts suggested fuel or ammunition storage within the buildings. The final 4 bombs struck the administrative complex. In less than 90 seconds, the port facility was transformed from an operational logistics hub into burning wreckage. At the same time, 2 destroyers in the strike group, the USS Thomas Hudner, DDG-116, and the USS Mason, DDG-87, launched Tomahawk cruise missiles. 6 missiles from each ship, 12 in total. Their targets were the escort units waiting near the port to protect the incoming shipment, armored vehicles, transport trucks, and personnel preparing to receive the cargo. Tomahawk missiles travel at roughly 550 miles per hour while flying extremely low, using terrain-following navigation to stay below most radar coverage. Approaching from several directions at once, they struck their targets in rapid sequence. The first impacts hit vehicle staging areas. The next destroyed fuel storage. The final missiles eliminated command buildings used to coordinate the escort. The entire escort force was disabled before it ever left its staging area. 456. Back in the Arabian Sea, the charges placed aboard the Kapitan Vulov began detonating. First came the hull breaches. Shaped charges punched through the steel plating, opening multiple holes below the waterline. Seawater rushed in at thousands of gallons per minute. The ship's automated damage control systems attempted to seal compartments, but secondary charges disabled the watertight doors, turning them from protective barriers into open pathways for flooding. Finally, the charges placed on the cargo containers activated. Each was calibrated to destroy its contents without triggering uncontrolled chain reactions. One by one, the weapons shipment that had traveled thousands of miles quietly disappeared inside the dark cargo holds of a ship that was already beginning to settle lower into the sea. The objective was simple: make sure the equipment could never be recovered. Ballistic missile components with shattered guidance systems, drone frames with burned-out circuit boards, electronic warfare units reduced to useless metal and wiring. Within 2 minutes of the first detonations, the Kapitan Vulov began to lean heavily to starboard. Even with the mission underway, the planners had prepared for the crew's safety. A second helicopter soon appeared overhead carrying rescue equipment. Inflatable life rafts were released onto the water and emergency locator beacons were activated. The operation had never been about harming the crew. The priority was eliminating the cargo while leaving the sailors alive to explain what had happened. 6 minutes after the first charge detonated, the Kapitan Vulov slipped beneath the surface. 800 feet of steel disappeared into waters more than 15,000 feet deep, taking with it nearly $1 billion worth of military equipment. Gone. Beyond recovery. About an hour later, a Pakistani Coast Guard vessel arrived and rescued the crew. Every sailor survived, but the cargo now lay scattered across the ocean floor, broken into pieces far too small and too deep to salvage. The aftermath revealed just how precise the entire operation had been. Iran lost far more than hardware. Plans had reportedly been underway for a major propaganda moment surrounding the arrival of the shipment. Instead, the outcome was the opposite. Damaged port infrastructure, escort forces neutralized, and $1 billion delivery resting on the seabed. Russia had little room to protest. Doing so would require acknowledging that advanced military equipment had been transported to Iran despite international restrictions. Official documents listed the Kapitan Vulov's cargo as agricultural machinery. Any formal complaint would have exposed that claim as false. So there was no protest, only silence. The financial comparison was stark. Iran had invested roughly $1 billion in the shipment itself. Russia lost a freighter estimated at around $80 million. Damage to facilities near Chabahar required reconstruction costing hundreds of millions more, while the destroyed escort vehicles added tens of millions in additional losses. Altogether, the combined losses for Iran and Russia reached roughly $1.3 billion. The costs on the other side were far smaller. 12 Tomahawk cruise missiles, about $1.8 million each, totaled roughly $21.6 million. The guidance kits used on the JDAM bombs added about $400,000. Aircraft fuel and flight hours added a few million more. The helicopter insertion, personnel support, demolition equipment, and specialized gear brought the overall figure to under $26 million. The numbers told their own story, but the financial calculation wasn't the only outcome. Around the world, intelligence agencies and military planners drew the same conclusion. Carrier strike groups don't only patrol sea lanes, they control them when necessary. The Kapitan Vulov now rests in fragments on the seabed, a billion-dollar example of the realities of modern naval operations. A ship can change its flag, cargo manifests can be altered, routes can be disguised, but it is extremely difficult to disappear from a global network of satellites, aircraft, sensors, and analysts that has been watching since the moment a vessel left port. it is just as difficult to evade helicopters that already know where you will be long before you arrive there. And once a full carrier strike group commits to stopping a shipment, the outcome becomes very predictable. By sunrise, the Arabian Sea looked calm again. There was no public confrontation, no diplomatic crisis, only a merchant ship that had suffered catastrophic structural failure in international waters. Its crew had been rescued. Meanwhile, somewhere in Tehran, planners faced an uncomfortable truth. A billion-dollar shipment had quietly become part of the ocean floor. That is often how deterrence works when few people are watching. Not through dramatic confrontations, but through precise operations designed to remove a threat and send a message to the right audiences. The message reached its targets. Iran understood it, Russia understood it, and other nations observing the situation likely understood it as well. Sometimes a lesson is delivered through noise and spectacle. Other times it arrives through silence. And the silence that follows the disappearance of a billion-dollar shipment can echo far louder than any headline. If you found this story interesting, consider subscribing and sharing the video. Your support helps bring more little-known stories from modern military operations to the channel.